Hello and welcome to lesson 3. This time we are going to be looking at some things that may not be proportional. Okay, in lesson 2, everything that we talked about was proportional the entire way. Lesson 3 is all about identifying if it's proportional or if it's not proportional. Okay, so we really have to pay attention today. Some of our problems are going to throw us a little bit of a curveball. Okay, again, I would like to remind you that order matters. So I know that we wrote it down in lesson 1, and we wrote it down in lesson 2, and we wrote it down in class, but you're going to write it again for lesson 3 so that hopefully it gets into your head. Okay. Now, if we look at this first example here, this is on page 8, the start of lesson 3. Congrats, you were hired by your neighbors to babysit for their kids on Friday night. You were paid $8 per hour. And if you remember from lesson 1, when we talk about per hour, we talk about a rate. And that tells us that for every 1 hour you work, you are paid $8. Okay, we're going to use that to fill out the rest of the table. For 1 hour, you are paid $8. Okay, that's going to come in handy. Okay? Because with our table, our first row here, if you're paid if you work for 1 hour, you're going to be paid again $8. If you work 2 hours, you're going to be paid $16, right? Because 2 times 8 is 16. If you work for 3 hours, you're going to be paid for $24. If you work 4 hours, you'll be paid $32. And then the next one gives us a little bit of a curveball here. Now, you're working for 4.5 hours. So in order to figure this out, we have to multiply 4.5 times 8. And when we do that, we find out that we're paid $36 to babysit. If we work for 5 hours, we'll get $40. If we work 6 hours, we'll get $48. And then this last one again, 6 5/10 or 6.5 hours. Again, to determine it, we're just going to multiply it by 8 because that's our per hour rate for babysitting. And we find out that we're paid $52. Okay. And then it says, based on the table above, is the pay proportional to the hours worked? Okay. Again, pay per hours. Okay. In that order. Well, we know that it is proportional because 8 over 1, or 8 divided by 1, is 8. The second one as a ratio, 16 to 2. 16 divided by 2 is 8. 24 to 3 is a unit rate of 8. 32 to 4 is a unit rate of 8. We already know that this is a unit rate of 8 because that's what we multiplied by. 40 to 5 is a unit rate of 8, 48 to 6, again, a unit rate of 8. Okay. In our problem, it kind of gave us that hint. Okay, but we needed to prove it with the table according to this question. Okay, so based on the table above, is it proportional? Yes, it is. So we're going to say yes. Pay is proportional to the hours worked. And then it asks us how we know, and it's because the unit rates are all the same. Okay, so it's proportional to the hours worked because the unit rates are all the same. Okay. We're going to do one more example together, and that is just on the very back side of this paper. So on page 9, we're going to flip this over. Okay, we're going to come up to the top, and now we're talking about some snowfall. How appropriate with the last week that we had. Okay. But we first have to read our directions. Okay. So for exercises 1 through 3, we need to determine if y is proportional to x. And again, order matters. So every time we look at tables for examples 1, 2, and 3, We're going to talk about our y value and then our x value. Then it asks us to justify our answer. So that means that we have to prove it. We have to look at those unit rates for each and every thing in our unit or in our table to see if they have the same unit rates. Okay? So for number 1, the table below represents the relationship of the amount of snowfall in inches in 5 counties to the amount of the time in hours of a recent winter storm. Okay, so again, for each and every one of these, we are going to go through and write down that fraction, divide through, and see if it has that same unit rate each and every time. Okay, so I'm going to have some workspace down here. I'm going to label one part of my workspace my ratios, and then I'm going to write my unit rates right next to them so that I can organize myself. Okay, looking at the table, the first one is 10 to 2. I know that 10 divided by 2 is 5. The next one is 12 to 6. 12 divided by 6 is 2. Uh-oh, I already don't have the same unit rates. Okay, we've never seen that before. I'm going to keep on going though and see what happens with the rest of my table. 16 to 8, that's a unit rate of 2. 5 to 2.5, again, a unit rate of 2. 14 to 7, I'm going to squeeze that in there down there. 14 divided by 7, again, is a unit rate of 2. Okay. Up until now, every single time we've looked at unit rates, they have been the same. But this time, you'll notice it is not the same. Because that 5 is in there, these are not proportional. So we're going to say that snowfall, because again, that's our y value here, so snowfall is not proportional to time. And this time, it's because the unit rates were not the same. Okay. So it's a pretty straightforward concept. If our unit rates are all the same, it's proportional. If our unit rates are not the same, it's not proportional. Okay. You are going to be answering questions 2, 3, and 4 in one of your stations. And you're going to follow that same concept and having your ratios and your unit rates written down to justify it, and then you're going to be answering your question in a complete sentence. All right, so that is it for this video.